MA21 Alliance. Let me just go ahead and, as you can see on the screen, what our agenda is for today. We'll just quickly go through the background information about MA21, and then we will jump on DDS, self-direction service regulations. The hearing June 18th. We'll give information about that, and then we'll touch on what it means to tell your story, share some talking points, and then from there we'll have an open dialogue. What we want to ask everyone is to, as we're going through the presentation, and it won't be a long one, but as your questions arise, just write them down, and if you could just wait until we get to the open dialogue to present that question, that would be great. Okay, Leo, you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so just real quick, many of you have attended our meetings in the past, but for those who have not attended, the MA21 Alliance was formed back, in 2007, really before then. The Alliance includes a number of organizations, and it's listed on our website. So, or I should say, when I say our, it's our, like anyone who's involved in these meetings and takes action to improve the self-direction service model, you are part of MA21. So thank you so much again for attending. The website, you can see the link when you go onto the MA21alliance.org, you'll see this screen right here. You have access to the fact sheet. You have access to information on our meetings. You have the opportunity to sign up for our communications, and that's joining our efforts. You have the opportunity to take action. Right now, we still have an open action item, and that is to contact your legislators in support of the self-direction service model. And just, again, it's reaching out to those who represent you as an individual with a disability, your family, anyone who is part of this effort to improve self-direction. And then you also have the opportunity to review previous meetings, and we'll make sure that we get our website updated so that you can view other meetings. Next slide. And so I already touched on MA21. So again, formed in 2007. It's just been a lot of work put into the reason why we exist, and it helped to pass the Real Lives Law, which was passed in 2014. Here is the list of the organizations that are part of the coalition. Mass Advocates Standing Strong, Mass Families, formerly known as Mass Families Organizing for Change, the ARC of Massachusetts, Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress, Advocates for Autism of Massachusetts, Massachusetts Sibling Support Network, the Disability Law Center, and Massachusetts Developmental Disabilities Council.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I gotta hit mute here. One sec. Sorry. Oh, I thought I was muted. Okay. I'm going to share with you about the regulations for a couple of slides, and then we're going to shift to Robert Beckett, who will walk through the then do your story, and then we'll go through the talking points with Robert. So, May 23rd, the Department of Development Services released these new proposed regulations. There's a virtual hearing for oral comments on June 18th, and that same day by 5 p.m. There'll be, requirement to get your written comments in. In addition, for the oral testimony, I want to make sure I move forward the right thing. The oral comments typically are 3 to 5 minutes. That doesn't mean you won't get a chance to go longer, because that's what happens a lot in hearings. And then they make everybody else do their testimony in 1 minute if there's not enough time. But ideally, you want to make your comments a summary of your written comments, unless your written comments are short. They are not held to a limit. And, basically, again, due June 18th, and the hearings on going to be on June 18th at 1 p.m. One of the things we're really encouraging the groups that you've seen that are part of the Alliance, as well as volunteers and family members and individuals with disabilities, we're encouraging you to share your story. And in the talking points, we have a bunch of questions. So, for example, who are you if you're using the service, or who is your family members? Say a little bit about him or her or them. And what is your support network like? What are the needs? Are the needs being met? Have you been given sufficient information, whether or not you use self-direction? Has anyone ever even told you about it? And did you understand how you got the budget that you received? That's available to meet your needs, and the plan, that the person-centered plan that's part of the ISP. Do you know, how is that worked out? And in one of our cases, some of the money was not being allowed to spend, but no one told the person that they had to modify the ISP, and then it would be okay because the nature of the spending was appropriate. So these are the kinds of things you could share in your testimony to say why it's really important to have the best regulations possible that align with the law itself, the real lives law. Okay, Robert.
Okay, so my name is Robert Beckett, and we sent out on, today's Tuesday, so on Monday we sent out a PDF on talking points that's more extensive than this PowerPoint. So I hope that all of you would look at that PDF document and supplement to this PowerPoint. Our statement here is the real lives regulations now state that self-directed services are available to all adults eligible for DDS, so they can exercise self-determination. And there's a little background to that, in that the previous regulations that were proposed in 2022 put 9 what Anne Fract in her verbal and written testimony regarded as challenging responsibilities on the participant, and those included the participant scheduling the provision of services and how they are to be provided, specifying how services are to be provided, specifying additional services of provider qualifications, and those are not responsibilities that are in the real lives law. And so basically the department took those 9 challenging functions out, or most of them, and so we saw that earlier as an impediment to participation in self-direction, these 9 issues. So now we're kind of just saying it, it appears that they are allowing, or to a great extent, it's going to be available to all adults. There is one section that we have a concern on, and Leo's going to address that. That's the section that added a clause, or it sets forth a clause allowing DDS to determine that a person cannot exercise self-determination due to risk of safety or well-being. Leo, do you want to?
Sure, happy to.
The nuance of that.
Yeah, we wondered why that's even there, and it gets us nervous, because all services should be safe, right? I mean, even traditional services, we don't want people to be in unsafe circumstances. In fact, if you look up the DDS regs proper that are preceded these regs are 1400, the same 115 CMR, Commonwealth Regulation 620, talks about the ISP, talks about safety and reasonable risk is included in that language, right? That won't unnecessarily jeopardize safety and health. So why is this here again? It begs the question for us, and we wonder if it is a technique that, again, there's 20-something area offices. Will it be used in 20-something different ways to preclude someone from using self-direction? So let me leave it there, and that's why we'll include that in the ARC's testimony as a concern that it should be removed and just rely on existing regulations. All right,
And
Robert.
yes, and I think, Leo, on that same issue, I think that the last sentence that you indicated there, an additional reference here and use of the word periodically determined, that's where you get into quite a bit of potential arbitrariness. And, in the middle of the self-determination, the support coordinator or perhaps a supervisor or somebody periodically determines that safety is a barrier. So
Good point.
That could be subject to the appeal, right? But it gives quite a bit of potential informal or formal authority to the department. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So on required transparent funding allocation, and again, if you could go back to if you went to the talking points in the PDF, we set forth in greater detail what the fact sheet says on each position, but we didn't for this PowerPoint. So, but in any event, the proposed regulations are closer to the law now. And by that, I mean, the regulations, DDS and the regulations finally have resolved that they are going to recognize the wording and the requirement of the Real Lives Law, which is that the funding allocation, that is what the budget amount you have available for services supports under the self-determination, self-direction budget, that's based on your current needs for services, and it's equivalent to the cost of traditional services. That's what the Real Lives Law says, and that's what the law is. So now the department has set forth in their regulations, I think clearly, that the funding shall be based on current needs for services and that it shall be equivalent to the cost of traditional services. And not that the department shall consider the cost of traditional services, but that the department shall be based on the cost. So that's that's a movement, or some would call it an improvement, just like it's better than the previous regulations, in that just as we dealt with the previous matter, they've taken out many challenging criteria that they say they indicated in the previous regulations that individuals needed to follow and be responsible for. One thing, though, that is not encouraging, I suppose you could say, is there's no reference now in the regulations to a method which is transparent to arrive at the funding allocation. So, the way we describe that in our talking points to you is, let me just get to that. Okay, so the way we describe it is that the regulation should have a proposed methodology which participants can rely on at the present time. Most individuals who use self-determination, self-directed services presently do not know how their allocations are determined, and they certainly don't know how their allocations are determined based on the traditional cost of services. So if you think about how you're supposed to have your funding allocation, you go into self-direction, you go through your ISP and your person-centered planning, you get the needs for the services, and then that then is meshed with what would be the traditional cost of services for for an individual with disabilities or whoever is leading in the participation. What is the traditional cost? And at this point, there's no way for you to know how the department calculated that tie to the traditional cost of services. And we provide greater detail in the PDF on that on page 4. Leo, do you want to address the next issue there?
Sorry,
Leo?
I was on mute. I did it.
Okay.
Okay, I had to get off mute. Yeah, so the other barrier to transparency, and I don't know how many of you are in this position where it's been clear to you through policy on how your allocation has been determined. But we worry that the other piece is that they're able to reduce the allocation. If you look at the regulation, especially this regulation 1406-5, which says DDS may reduce its allocation based on mass health or other resources. Well, if you're getting a 5 days community-based day support or community-based day unemployment, you don't have to worry about that issue. You may have to worry about it if you're mixing mass health day services and DDS day services, right? That's very specific because you're enrolled to another day service that's at the same time as the DDS day service. But what if you're getting something else that's a resource, and even if it's things that are outside private resources, why should they work against you're getting your right allocation, whereas no one's paying for their CBDS service, right? Personally. So that seems like another barrier around funding and transparency that we're concerned about. Anything else you want to say about that before we go to the next?
Well, I just would say that if the department followed through and actually did consider other mass health or other resources, if they did, it typically would not be transparent to the individual when they get down to what is your funding allocation, because there's no tie to traditional cost of services. So you don't know how they've calculated that. So it's just another nuance or another consideration of how difficult it will be for people to determine whether the funding allocation is, as the Real Lives Law requires, is transparent and is done in a consistent manner. So those are the words that the Real Lives Law uses. Okay, on budget authority, I want to say on budget authority that the proposed regulations really are no substantially different than the regulations that were issued in 2022. So the importance of that is that in 2022, when the first proposed regulations were rather withdrawn, there were very significant comments, very detailed comments on how the proposed regs unduly restricted the choice of services, paying organizations, companies, or for health training groups, educational or cultural group activities. There was substantial comment, and in the PDF talking points that we sent to everybody on Monday, I'm sorry, yesterday, at the bottom in a footnote are the written comments that we took out that we thought were the most significant written comments on this issue of budget authority. So I would really encourage you to go to that. We've linked to that in the PDF talking points, to go to the MA21 library and look at those comments from those individuals and organizations that spent a great deal of time in 2022 addressing the unnecessary restrictions on budget authority, because they're still valid. I mean, the comments are valid because, again, the department did not change the regulations on budget authority. Let's see if I had any. Oh, and I wanted to just, Diane, could you just for a second go to the second slide? Or could you, the second slide? No, at the very top. I'm sorry. Very top. Okay, right there. Okay, right there. Yeah. So I just want to say to you that if some of you didn't get the PDF, or you don't find it, or you can't get to that link, this website, this front page, if you scroll down, it doesn't have it on this PowerPoint, but if you scroll down on the bottom right, we have a resources, and one of them is the MA21 library, and that's where all previous proposed regs are and all the previous comments, as well as a wealth of other information. We're trying to improve it, but I want you to know you can get to that if you scroll down. There you go. Thank you. So that, and then if you see, we've kind of buried it, but if you see where it says MA21 document library, you know, we kind of got the world there, but we do have these written comments on the proposed regs. We have the regs, the 2022 regs up. We have the 2024 regs up. So it's a good source if anybody's got the time or will look at the world. Okay, Leo, go back down. I spent enough time on that, but I would just urge you to look at the broad authority, and you know the point of that is that, you know, the whole idea of self-determination, self-direction is to be able to have the opportunity to select support services and goods. And, you know, when it all comes down to it, the department has severely restricted the program to what would be called an employer-employee model and one-to-one, rather than allowing for a broad array of services. And by the way, the waivers, if you're familiar with the Medicaid waivers, which many individuals with disabilities are on, when they did the waiver applications, they checked all the boxes to say they would have broad budget authority, but unfortunately it's not being implemented.
And
Okay.
Robert, I just want to add the reason this language is this way, because we were trying to do it in a very short amount of space. Just making the point about they could be group activities should be allowed, which is one of the big breaking points that have happened for people in terms of the limitation.
So what Leo's referring to, and then I'll go to the PDF because yes, we did shorten this. And so one of the suggestions in the PDF is that list services you may need now or would like to use with your budget authority, such as paying a music center or company for lessons to enhance your music skills, parentheses, piano, voice, etc. Gym or athletic program or other group activities that you want to use to address health and related services, which are now allowed. An alternative educational program during the day, which is not formally a CBDS or other rate-based service. A contractor has found you qualified staff, but is not an agency with choice provider, and your use of the company is limited. Sharing your story in relation to those or other services would be appropriate for this regulation. Okay. And Leo, I did want you to discuss. Oh, this is the next one on 202. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, yeah, I did want you to discuss the utilization issue. That's what the first bullet point is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. You know, the law does say that a budget can be changed based on trends. The whole point of a regulation, as a commissioner pointed out recently at the Self-Determination Advisory Board meeting, is to interpret what the implications of that law are in a reasonable way, right? So unfortunately, since it's rare that DDS would increase your allocation, you know, our concern is that without further clarification of under what terms would that allocation be reduced, especially if you object to the allocation being reduced, right? What is the method for that? Just like there's no method to go from assessed need and match it to traditional service, you may not even know what the traditional service costs, right? Now there's no method for when it's time actually to change your spending because you're not using it. Utilization is the word that they use. And that just means how much you used it. You were supposed to use 45,000 this year. You only used 25,000. However, there was things out of your control that stopped you from using the money. And also the person working with you didn't tell you that if you changed your ISP and had it modified, as happened to one of our friends here today, that you could have used it in another area. So leaving that piece of information out is not too helpful. So we're concerned that it's not clear, there's no method again, and there should be parameters, you know, guidelines around how you would do that. And we know that present policy doesn't have those kind of guidelines. And remember, again, you have 20-something offices with 20 different interpretations, as we discussed before. Okay, all right, Robert.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Go to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, then another improvement, again, or at least certainly better than the 2022 regulations, is that the Real Lives Law has required now for 10 years that there will be independent facilitators available to participants to use the independent facilitator if they want to. However, that law provided that the department, by regulation, had to determine what the minimal qualifications. Well, the department has never issued regulations, so therefore there have been no minimal qualifications, and so therefore there's never been an independent facilitator choice, because you can't have it without minimum qualifications as by regulation. So they excluded that in the 2022 proposed regulations, now withdrawn, but now they have established it in the proposed regulations that were issued May 23rd. So the minimal qualifications that they have discussed basically are to be 18 years of age, go through the fingerprinting, and have worked for working relationship for 2 years with a person with intellectual developmental disabilities. So that may not seem like a barrier, but one example I have is, well, what if a participant wanted a friend or a neighbor who's a licensed social worker or a licensed counselor who has many years of experience, but whose practice has not included at least 2 years experience working with an individual with intellectual developmental disabilities. So, I mean, I think you can see where that might be a barrier that you might not anticipate. And fundamentally, the participant probably should be able to determine who the person would be, assuming they have qualifications. So we've nuanced this a little bit, and maybe suggesting that we have in the definition that includes people who have relationships or connections to persons with IDD for a couple of years. The other thing that the other states that have independent facilitators, we're not reinventing the wheel here, that there's many states with independent facilitators or independent advocates, whatever they exactly call it, in the self-determination program. It's fundamental to many other states' programs. And that by independent, we mean somebody who is not employed by the individual and does not provide any services to the individual. They pretty much across the board, the states have adopted a training program, which if somebody has to complete, get a certificate or whatever, and that's the way in which they've tried to establish, minimum qualifications, not making it too onerous, but everybody's got to go through a training program that's recognized as sufficient by the department. Okay. And then on appeal rights, again, the proposed regulations now are better than the previous ones. The previous regulations that were withdrawn provided for a 14-day appeal period, and that was raised by many commentators, and the department acquiesced to a more normal 30-day appeal process, which is typically what the process or the timeline is for other situations. And the department also included in the appeal process that if the department denied the right to self-direct, that was not in the original appeal rights. If they denied the right to self-direct, that's an appealable situation. So one of the things that I've always been concerned about is what are called informal denials. And this happens with agencies, but an individual participant or their representative is informally denied self-direction by, oh, that'd be too difficult, or no, that doesn't fit your situation. You have residential services. No, that's not a good idea. And the kind of informal denials, as opposed to formally stating, we are not allowing you to self-direct because of, and you have appeal rights. So that may seem formalistic, but I'm always concerned about informal denials. And the last thing here is this is very nuanced, but the DDS should include probably in the regulation when it's required to send a formal letter to someone on self-direction that is either denying self-direction or is limiting services or whatever, and include appeal rights and timelines. So that's something that individuals will comment on, and I think request that there be greater definition in the regulation as to when a notice with appeal rights is appropriate. Okay. And Leo, you want to take this one?
Sure. So this is related to the definition of participant, and we note in the PowerPoint that that actually it's a position not shared by 100% of the steering committee members on MA21. And but we're including the issue because some of those of you families that are involved would probably want to know about this. And a few of the groups do want to. I don't know if it's 5 of the groups or 4 of the groups, but it's a number of the groups are concerned that the regulations do not embrace the law, the real lives law, in terms of and leave out parent. Okay. And parent when it's appropriate is the language. And it's not just parent when it's appropriate. It's there's other names that are included, other roles that are included, but parents is omitted. And just the concern of a few of us in a few of our organizations is it seems odd, the omission, or it's striking, because often more than 60%, well, not often, more than 60% of people with intellectual developmental disabilities live with family. They are quite interdependent. And also often when there isn't enough funding for services, the state agency pushes back on a parent or a sibling to pick up where the state agency can't. On the other hand, we know we have some of our friends feel like, well, it can be overpowering, but we think we should stick with the definition or just add the word parent and when appropriate in that clause for the definition. And so that's one, but we wanted to note that there wasn't 100% agreement on that.
So I would just encourage people to, in reading the regulations, there are definitions, and this is in the definition section. It says it's the participant definition. Well, the real lives law also has a definition. So it already defines participant, and the real lives law states that a participant is an individual with disabilities receiving department services and, when appropriate, an individual's parents, legal guardian, conservator, or other authorized representative who has voluntarily agreed to take part in and has been determined eligible for the self-determination option. So at least some in MA21, I think of course I come from I'm a parent of a 47-year-old with Down syndrome, and we certainly assist him. We're not his guardian, but I think that what would be fair is for the department to adopt the definition in the law, because that is the law. And if they don't care for the law, that is the law. So I think that's the thinking. And I do want to premise it by the fact that the individual with disabilities or his legal representative, they're always going to be the ones that's going to determine whoever should participate, whether that's a sibling or a parent or whatever. So this is not a matter of control. This is a matter of that, because the individual with disabilities or his legal representative is always going to have that ability to choose. It's just a matter that I think the law, the definition of the law ought to be consistent with the regulations. Okay.
So our next meeting, Diane, is what, September 17th at 1:30, unless there's a need to have a summer meeting. And